body knows it's declining and it's getting prepared to die, even in younger people, even in younger people.
As miraculous as birth is, death is just another stage of that journey, right?
Dying part's not the painful part. Diseases can cause symptoms and pain, but not dying. Being in that environment where we are trying to keep people alive at all costs helped me see that that is not the way we need to go in healthcare. And certain people we know will die because of certain diseases they have. There has to be a better way than trying to deny that at all costs. In the car, I could hear his voice in my head, and I could feel feelings of excitement. I can't help but smile when I talk about it. And his voice goes, "Oh my gosh, Julie, oh my gosh." And then that's when I found out it was called a shared death experience.
I'd like to welcome to the show Julie McFadden. How you doing, Julie?
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm excited to hear about your life journey and what you do and what you've seen, because I've had you're a hospice nurse, and they call you Hospice Nurse Julie at Hospice Nurse Julie. And I've had a hospice doctor on before, and that episode did insanely well years ago. And I'm fascinated to see or hear stories of people who are on the front lines of when people pass, because I heard this is just a quick little story of another guest who died and came back. And when he came back, he started to talk about, he had a near-death experience. And when he came back, he started talking to the nurse there. And it's and this happened, and this happened. And the nurse was this old school, been seen it all, shrapnel, just a shrapnel-ridden nurse.
I know the type.
Right. That's seen it all and not impressed. And she's like, "Oh, honey, you just went to the other side and came back." And she did it as such a matter of fact. You just died. You saw heaven and you came back. It happens all the time.
Yes.
So
that's amazing.
I'm always fascinated by the frontline workers when it comes to this. So first and foremost, why did you go down the hospice route as a nurse? Because it can't be easy spiritually, mentally, emotionally. You're literally, because normally nurses are there to save people. And when someone passes, it's like a tragedy. But when you're a hospice, we all know where this is going. And it's so difficult. So what made you go down this road?
I get this question all the time. And I get the response that hospice nursing must be so hard. What makes you want to do it? And what made me want to do it is working as an ICU nurse for around 7 or 8 years. I really have to figure that out because I answer this question all the time and I never actually know the exact number. But I was an ICU nurse for long enough, let's say that. Mm-hmm. And being an ICU nurse, being that nurse, being in that environment where we are trying to keep people alive at all costs, helped me see that that is not the way we need to go in healthcare. Mm-hmm. We have made leaps and bounds in Western medicine to keep us living much longer of a time, which is amazing most of the time. And then I think we get to a place, because we are such a death-denying culture, that it slips into suffering more than surviving. They're not surviving at all costs, life at all costs. Mm-hmm. And after at least 2 years in the ICU, I started being wait a minute, this is not what I signed up for. First off, we don't have enough time with our patients. And in the ICU, you only have 1 or 2 patients. That's usually the acuity. And it still felt like I didn't have enough time to truly talk to the family about what was truly happening, enough to talk to the patient, although usually sedated and intubated on a bunch of machines, but still talk to them about what was happening with their, life and what their goals in life were. I just didn't have enough time. It was we couldn't see the forest from the trees. Families, I could tell, didn't fully understand the scope of what was happening to their loved one. Even if we could get them out of the ICU, what was their survival rate? None of that was really talked about. People would come in with terminal illnesses for certain surgeries and then be in the ICU for 6 months. Meanwhile, this terminal illness is likely even if they got out of the ICU, they still had a terminal illness, which was never being addressed. Right.
Mm,
So it just made me be like, there has to be a better way. There has to be a better way. And I started getting confident or gaining confidence as an ICU nurse to start having these difficult conversations about end of life and what were really the outcome, what were really the goals for this person, and giving the reality to the families about what was truly happening.
hmm.
And that was making them make the families make the decision to let their loved ones die in the hospital because they now fully had all the information. And I just saw that if we're going to die, which we all are, and certain people we know will die because of certain diseases they have, there has to be a better way than trying to like deny that at all costs, and
Right.
die this, I think, awful death in the ICU.
When
So that's what got me passionate about moving to hospice.
mhm.
And then, man, did I, then I've been learning ever since, about the miracles of death, which sounds so strange to say, but that is what it felt like to me as a going from an ICU nurse to a hospice nurse and seeing death like the hospice death way. It felt miraculous.
But the thing is that I agree with you. The Western society is very death avoidance. Like it doesn't really
Yeah.
exist. We're not going to really die kind of
Yeah.
thing. It's not celebrated. It's a very somber thing. Other cultures celebrate the life. It's a part of this. It's the Lion King. It's the circle of life. It
Yeah.
starts and the whole universe is about recycling, cycling. There's a cycle to everything on the planet and on the universe. There's always cycles, and death is part of that cycle. And in many ways, it's joyous because this road is over. This journey is over for us. Sometimes it's tragic, obviously, when they're young.
Yeah.
But if you have someone who's in their elder years, who's lived a good, solid life, I always found that fascinating. My parents said, "Don't you dare hook me up to a
Hmm.
machine." Like, don't like, because they saw that with their parents.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't want to sit around like a vegetable for 6 years because I can be technically kept alive. But what kind of life is that? So
Right.
it should, I think you're right. It should be changed into a more miraculous thing. As miraculous as birth is, death is
Yeah.
just another stage of that journey, right?
Right. I say that all the time. And that's been my experience as a hospice nurse. So those are the things that I learned as a new hospice nurse, watching the body not need much at the
Hmm.
end of life, meaning like we didn't have to do a lot as nurses. Now sometimes we do, right? But there were certain circumstances where like I saw how our bodies are built to die. And the less we do and the more we allow that to happen, the better the person usually does and the more peaceful the death usually is. That was mind blowing to me. I truly didn't know that. I didn't know that our body had built in mechanisms to shut off hunger and thirst, to have our calcium levels rise so we sleep a lot. I didn't know that allowing the body to do that naturally helps the body shut down and helps the person die more peacefully.
Really?
I
I
didn't
never
know that
thought,
as a healthcare worker.
wow. And they don't teach you that at medical school, I'm assuming.
I mean,
Or nursing school.
I haven't been to medical school, but
Nursing school. Yeah, nursing
from what
school.
I've heard, yeah, from what
Yeah.
they didn't teach it in nursing school. No, I mean, I don't even remember learning about death in nursing school. I'm sure we did, but I don't remember. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't remember.
It's like
Yeah,
nutrition in a medical school. You have one 15-minute class on it, and that's the end of it. Uh,
yeah,
right?
yeah. You
But it's
pass the test and like forget.
yeah,
Yeah,
you're done. You're done. But
yeah,
what I find fascinating, I never heard that before, that the body itself is designed. I
yes,
mean, our DNA gradually deteriorates throughout our life. It's just part of the nature of what we do. We could do things to lengthen that timeline by health, by taking care of yourself, by the foods you eat, the environment you live in, all these kind of different factors. But I never really thought about towards the end that your body's like, okay, it's time. Let's start. Okay, guys, it's send this out. We got need more calcium. Okay, we need to do this. Let's cut off hunger and
yes.
thirst. It's time to go. It's time to
And
end.
it really does happen. I mean, I think, like you said, it's more tragic in like a younger population.
Sure.
Agreed. and usually is a little harder, meaning like the disease that they're dying from usually cause more symptoms. The rest of their body's doing okay, so it's a little more of a struggle, right? But I would still say their body still knows
Yes.
intuitively,
Hmm.
and not even and I'll say intuitive, but I really mean like biologically. This is not like woo woo stuff I'm saying. This is like literal biology. The body can start sensing and shutting things down because the body knows it's declining and it's getting prepared to die, even in younger people. Even in younger people. Hence why almost everyone on hospice will always stop eating and drinking. They don't want it. They don't want food and water. And that is
Hmm.
because the body is telling them that.
Yeah, it's time to go. It's time
Yeah,
to
it's time to
the
go. It
ride's over.
actually makes it easier. Yeah, the ride is over. It's time to go. This will make it easier. We're not going to make you hungry and thirsty.
You don't have
Yeah.
to go, but you can't stay here.
Yeah. 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 And then
Um,
hospice, of course, is there to like help with anything that might come up because
Pain,
I
of
don't want to
course.
paint this perfect picture of like nothing needs to be done. So sometimes the
No, no.
disease you're dying from
It's
can be
painful.
painful,
Yeah, sure, of
but
course, of course.
dying itself, no. The process of dying, how dying looks if you're on hospice and dying what I would call a natural death, even if it's from something,
Hmm.
the dying part's not the painful part. Diseases can cause symptoms and pain, but not dying.
So let me ask you, because I've heard this and I actually experienced it with my grandfather when he passed. They People who are about to die, they generally don't like to die with other people in the room. They'll wait for you to go get some water, they'll wait to leave, and they want to die. A lot of times I've found that they want to die alone because they don't want to cause that pain or they just want to leave by themselves.
Right.
Is that your experience as well? Because it happened with my grandfather. He waited for everyone to leave and then he just died. Like we all went to just get a drink or like some chips or something and then when we came back, he was gone.
Right. Well, so that is one of the phenomenons that I would say it's like a phenomena of end of life where people can kind of choose how and when they die.
Hmm.
And I think it's really based on people's personalities. So I think sometimes people will wait until everyone's there. Everyone's in town. I had a woman who was like the matriarch of the family where she had a bunch of kids, a bunch of grandkids, great grandkids. She was in her late 90s, right? Kept the family together, so super close with her family. Family was huge to her. She actively died, which means like the last phase of life where you're unconscious, changes in breathing, no food and water. And she was in her 90s, mind you. She was like that for 3 weeks because she was literally
Waiting.
waiting for everyone to come
Yeah.
into town. And everyone came into town and then she died. So I think it depends on the person's personality. Now, I think people who are independent, um, not shy, but like introverted or prideful or, don't want to be taken care of, things like that. Like my mom is still alive, but she would be like that. Like she would want people to all be gone so she could die alone, basically, because she doesn't want them to see her like that. She wouldn't want us to see her like that. So I think it depends on the personality. I've also seen people like literally choose a date when they were going to die, and they died on that date.
Is it uh,
Uh,
is it true that more what I had well there was this you remember Carrie Fisher, of course, Princess Leia.
yeah,
When she died, the next day her mother died right after her.
yeah,
And she literally went to her son and goes, I have to go with Carrie. I'm leaving. And
yeah,
she just died. She didn't kill it. She just died. It was the
yeah,
craziest, like, so that's a perfect example of someone in the public eye that did that. Literally just like, oh, I gotta go. And she was
yeah.
gone. It was crazy. That you've seen that happen before.
There is a syndrome called like the broken heart syndrome where I don't know if they've actually done studies on it, but they do think there's like stress hormones that happen when someone dies that could technically affect the heart. And that's why people say people die of a broken heart. A couple who's been, married for
Oh,
60 years, the wife dies and the husband dies soon after.
always does. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so there could actually be some biological things to the dying from a broken heart.
Mhm.
But also I had a patient once tell her caregiver, like, I'm dying tonight. Please take care of my son because she had a disabled son. Please take care of my son. Promise me you will. And the caregiver's like, what are you talking about? You're going to be fine. Like, I know you're on hospice, but you're not dying right
Tonight.
now.
Yeah.
yeah, tonight I'll take care of your son. Don't worry. And she said, no, I'm tired. I'm going home. She called her son in, said, said her goodbyes to him, and then she died.
Amazing.
I mean,
Oh, amazing.
that's the kind of stuff that it happens a lot. I see it a
Yeah.
lot on hospice, but those are like unexplainable things, I don't know.
And on the theme of unexplainable things, I'm sure you've
Yes.
got a couple of stories of things that have happened.
Yes.
You've mentioned that you've had a shared death experience. Now, I've had a doctor who
Yes.
came on who talks all about shared death. He was a doctor and he went through it, and
Yes.
he wrote a book about it. He's a big thing. Forgot his name off the top of my head, but I've heard of shared death experiences. Now, there's a near death experience, which is someone that passes, uh, they're dead, could be for a second, could be for 10 minutes. I've actually heard longer, and they come back. But this is a shared death experience. Can you explain what a shared death experience is to everybody?
Well, I learned what it was after I told my story. Like I told this
Right.
story, which I can tell. And then
Mhm.
people were saying, that's a shared death experience. That's a shared death experience. So then I've learned kind of in hindsight what it was. So shared death experience is basically, I'm sure it could happen different ways, but it's when someone who is dying shows you what it's like. So they kind of take you along with them. And I'm sure there are various degrees of that. But
Mhm.
that was what my experience was. It was like I was shown what it was like to die, or like to quote unquote, like maybe cross over.
Let's walk through it. What was that story?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So my favorite patient, yes, I have a favorite. I feel bad saying that, but like I can't help it. This guy, I
Yeah.
still think of him all the time. Okay, so yeah, I want to give the backstory because I love him so much. And like it kind of plays into like the feeling behind it and why I was so happy for him. So he came onto our service, he was young, dying of a terminal illness, obviously. He had a lot of mental health issues. So when we showed up at his house as a hospice team, he had a hoarding issue. He didn't have friends and family, per what he said. Very anxious demeanor. Um,
How old?
I'll give you a general age, like 40 to 50.
Oh, okay.
40 to
Young,
50, general
fairly
age.
young. Yeah, young guy still. Yeah.
Yeah, young guy. And yeah, just like very, very anxious demeanor and clearly like in unsafe living conditions. Okay.
Mhm.
And luckily, I feel like because he had this terminal diagnosis, he almost had this like new, like this new ability to kind of like want to let things go. I mean, hence he was a hoarder. Hoarders, that's a mental illness. You can't just get rid of the stuff. They'll get more stuff, right? So
Mhm.
luckily, though, when we met him, I think because he knew he was dying, he sort of like turned over a new leaf and he allowed us to like reach out to people that might know him, distant relatives, cousins, things like that, to help come in town and like basically clean out his apartment so he's a safe place to live and kind of get this journey started for him. And he allowed us to do that. So within one weekend, we got in touch with like distant cousins who came in town, helped get rid of all of his stuff in the house so he could have like a nice apartment to live in. And I remember coming back after all of that happened, and he was like a new man. He was like so happy that he had this apartment again and that
Mhm.
he saw his cousins who stayed for a while and ended up leaving. And because of that, I feel like he ended up living on hospice for much longer than we thought he would have. The type of cancer he had was very advanced and he usually died pretty quickly, but he ended up being with us probably for 9 months, maybe more.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
I know. And he was
Yeah.
like pretty well. Like his pain was controlled, but he could still like walk around and do things, right? So I say all this because for 9 months, my visits were not that complicated. And really all I did was like sit around and talk with him. Maybe change meds once in a while if his pain increased, but for the most part, we just talked. And he was so interesting. And we talked about life and death and what he thought and his hopes and fears and like all these existential questions, right? And of course, I didn't really have answers for him. So it was just sort of like him and I just talking about what we thought, or, it was never me giving him like answers because I don't know what happens. I was just listening to what he had to say. And slowly he did get to the point where he was in the actively dying phase, which is like the last phase of life. And We did have a continuous care nurse in his home, meaning a nurse that was there 24/7 to care for him because he was having like intermittent agitation and things like that. But he was mostly unconscious. And the last day I visited, because I had to visit every day while the continuous care nurse was there, just to make sure everything was okay, I could tell he would die that day just from being a hospice nurse for a while. I could tell the way he was breathing, how he looked, like I think he would die that day.
Okay.
So I said my goodbyes to him in my head because he was unconscious. And I just said, like, thank you for everything. Like, I hope you have a beautiful journey, yada, yada. And I told the continuous care nurse, hey, when he dies, text me because I knew he would die like pretty soon. And I left. And as a hospice nurse, it's so weird. You like leave your most favorite patient and then go who's dying and then go to your next patient, right? So I had a weird feeling leaving, but like you got to do what you got to do. And I got in my car, and before I left, I was like, no, I sat there and like basically kind of started talking to him in my head again, just saying like, thank you for your friendship. Like, you're so wonderful, blah, blah, blah. Hope everything works out. Like, thank you for letting me care for you, all this stuff. And then all of a sudden in the car, I could hear his voice in my head, and I could feel like feelings of like excitement. I can't help but like smile when I talk about it. Like, and his voice goes, "Oh my gosh, Julie. Oh my gosh." And he was smiling. I could like see him and hear him and feel what he was feeling. Best way I could describe it. It's kind of like I was transported somewhere else, you know? And he was going, "Oh my gosh, Julie. Oh my gosh. If I only would have known. If I only would have known." And this feeling of like peace and joy and kind of like soaring or like exuberance, like just came over me. And he wasn't saying much except for, "Oh my gosh, Julie. Oh my gosh, Julie. If I only would have known." But the essence of what he gave me was like, if I only would have known how amazing this is, I would not have feared this. Because we had many conversations of him saying he was a little afraid, you know, he was a little scared. And I knew in his life, he felt very restricted and tons of anxiety, and he had mental health issues. And he was showing me how free he was, like the immense feeling of freedom and release and joy and excitement and peace that I felt in that moment when he was going, "Oh my gosh, Julie. Oh my gosh." He was almost like whispering to me, "I can't believe it." I was like weeping in my car, weeping, 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 tears of joy, because I couldn't, the feeling was so overwhelming. If I can get into it, I can almost relive it again and again. And almost as soon as it started, it ended probably, you know, maybe 30 seconds. But once it ended, it was like, whew, I was kind of like back in my car again, like back to this reality, which made me realize I wasn't in this reality, if that makes sense. And my phone beeped and I looked at it, and it was the nurse saying, "So-and-so just died." And I thought, I know, because I feel like he just showed me like what it was like, that moment he had when he was, well, if you want to say crossing over or something, right? And I just said, thank you. And we started planning things. I didn't tell her what just happened because I didn't know what just happened. I was kind of like godsmacked. I was like wiping my tears in my car, being like, what the heck just happened? You know, and that's never happened to me before. Did that really happen? You know, that's where I go, like, did that really happen? What's going on? And I think like years later, I finally decided to tell people, because I didn't tell anybody, because people always ask me why I didn't really fear death. And there's many reasons why I don't fear death. But this reason is one of the main reasons why. This like feeling and experience I had. So finally, I just told people. Because I thought, you know what, this is why. And I've been like kind of like hiding one of the reasons, right? And then that's when I found out it was called a shared death experience. And yeah, I'm forever grateful. It was amazing.
So when you were being shown, you were seeing this all in your mind's eye, or did you like kind of physically see this?
No, it's all mind's eye.
Mind's eye
It's hard
stuff.
to explain because I don't actually fully understand it myself, right? But
Sure.
it did feel like I was like somewhere else, but not like physically with my eyes that I see it, right? It was like in my mind's eye or in my mind's ear too. Like I heard his voice in my head. But it did sound like his voice. It didn't sound like mine. It sounded like his voice in my head. And then I had feelings of like what he was feeling and kind of like visuals in my head.
And what were the
And
visuals
the
again?
visual was him smiling and like almost like soaring. And I
Okay.
was kind of there too. I think,
Hmm.
it's very hard to articulate because it's never happened before.
From what I've understood from shared death experiences, this is the first one I've heard that you were not in the room. It usually happens when you're in the room. This is a very
Oh,
odd, yeah, this is a very odd one because I've never heard of a shared death experience that someone was not in the room. You
yeah, no, I
hear,
wasn't in the room. I was in my car. Yeah, I was
right,
in my car.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, when you hear stories and maybe you have stories like this too, is like grandma shows up at the edge of your bed to say goodbye to you while you're sleeping, and then you get a phone call like 5 minutes later, grandma died. That I've
Yeah,
heard. That's not a shared death
yeah,
experience. That's just a visitation essentially of someone saying
yeah,
goodbye to you as they're going. But uh, the ones I've heard have been all in a room and they see everything that's happening, but they can only go so far. There's like this, there's point of no return. In other words, you can't go
right.
past this because you're not dying. We're
Yep,
giving
yep.
it's a view. We're giving you a view of what's going to be, but it's not that. It was a tremendous gift for you to get this
Yeah, oh,
access because
completely.
for your work and now the work that you do on YouTube and all your platforms to kind of share this information and your book as well. It's pretty mind blowing. So how did you? Well, let me ask you. Were you spiritual before this?
Yeah, I've always been spiritual since I've been a little girl.
Okay.
I feel like I was like born like that. It's very my some of my earliest memories are of like me having existential questions like asked to my mom. Like why are we here? What are we doing here? Why am I here? Where did I come from? Where am I going? Like I've always been a seeker in that sense. But and so I would say like generally speaking, I believe in something greater, something bigger than me, or more powerful and loving than me, I suppose. But I wouldn't say I'm like into this, like spiritual things, right? I'm not seeking it. Hence why I can have these experiences and not tell anyone for years
Years.
because I don't want people to know because I don't know what it is and I can't explain it. And so I keep it to myself or I kept it to myself.
Yeah, you've come out of the closet. I hate to tell you,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, you've definitely come out of the closet at this point.
Yeah.
After you write a book, you're pretty much done.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, millions
so,
of views. This kind
Mil-
of this is the thing where I was like shy to tell it, and of course, it's like the video that gets like 9 million views, and you're
right.
like, okay, well, here we are.
The- hence the YouTube button behind you.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, so when you came out of the closet, the shared death experience closet, how did your other colleagues kind of deal with it? Because I always ask those kind of questions because I'm always curious on the
Yeah.
psychological um, deal that people have to go through when they come out like, hey, I died and I saw Jesus, or I had a shared death experience. I'm a psychic medium now. And like, oh, I used to be a military person, but now I'm a psychic medium. Like your people around you must look at you a little differently. But I have a feeling that other hospice nurses
Yeah.
probably didn't look at you side-eyed. They probably like, oh, okay. Because they're around this energy all the time.
Right.
Is that kind of what happened?
Yeah. No, I didn't get whether maybe they are judging me not to my
Quietly.
face. I don't know,
Yeah.
right? But generally speaking, like friends, family, colleagues, followers, other people on TikTok and YouTube that I'm friends with,
Mhm.
no one said anything. They most of the time they shared some of their experiences, specifically other hospice nurses. I mean, maybe not a shared death experience happens to everybody, but visioning, which we can get into, is something that
Please.
happens on hospice, all the time. Like you can't really deny it.
So what's
Happens all the time.
visioning?
So
So what's visioning? What's
visioning
visioning?
is when a dying person, and it usually happens a few weeks before they die, will see loved ones who have already died, or friends who have already died, pets who have already died. Sometimes they see deities, depending on what they believe. If they're Christian, sometimes they say Jesus or like an archangel. And I've seen other religions see other things, so it doesn't really have to be Christian. But sometimes they'll see deities, sometimes they'll see angels. But it's usually like loved ones who they love and care for who have already died that make visitations. I mean, that happens in probably like 80% of people. It's not always
Really?
reported. Yeah, it's not always reported, so it's hard to get like a real number.
Mhm.
But and it usually happens around 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks before they die. So they're not really like on death's door.
Mhm.
There's a while. People think and talk, I mean, this is like my number one thing. People are always like, "Oh, we don't know why it happens." We don't. And it might not be anything spiritual. Who knows? It could be a biological thing. But we do know that it's not happening because of lack of oxygen and medication,
Mhm.
because those things we rule out. And the person who has low oxygen, usually that's the very, 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 very end of life. And people who are visioning are not at the very, very, very end of life. They're, 3 weeks out or something, and their oxygen's fine. So there's a huge difference between, delirium, like ICU psychosis, where people are seeing like scary things and bugs and things like that, than visioning. Visioning is very clear. They're not confused most of the time, and they know who they are, and they're almost as surprised as anybody else. I've had many patients secretly come up to me after everyone's out of the room and grab my arm, and whisper like, "I'm afraid to say this because I'm afraid you're going to think I'm crazy, but my parents came to me last night. They said they're not coming yet, but they're going to come soon and not to worry, and they're going to take care of me." And they're kind of like, "What does it mean?" You know, what does that mean? And I always
I,
just say, "I don't know, but it happens all the time." And
it's
do you
that
feel better? And they're like, "Yeah, I do feel better." I'm like, "Great, let's
if
go with
there's
it, man."
so these kind of deaths allow that because they're longer, stretched out deaths, as
Yeah.
opposed to an accident or something like that. That's very
Yeah. And of
quick.
course, though, we don't know, though. Maybe an accident that happens, a person can't
Maybe,
report it, right?
yeah, there's that. Unless they have a near-death experience and then they come back, which
That's
I've
true. Yes, yes,
that's.
yes. Yeah.
But generally
Yeah.
speaking, I've heard this before. I actually had a medium come on the show, and she explained the 12 stages of death. Of what
Oh, okay.
it's fascinating. She wrote a whole book about it, of what and who comes up in the order they come in weeks. Basically, what you just said, in the weeks coming to their death, and it's done as a kind of a runway for them,
Yeah.
like a soft runway for them to come in because it's apparently very traumatic a lot of times from the human world to the spiritual world. There's a lot of confusions. There's a lot of, and it also depends on what you're bringing in from the human space.
Oh, okay.
Like if you've got a lot of dogma in you,
Right.
a lot of that stuff, you kind of bring that in there, and you need somebody, whoever that is. It could be Jesus, it could be mom, it could be Uncle Bob, whoever it is, to kind of walk you through this and calm you. Like it's okay, you'll remember slowly but surely you'll understand who you are, and then finally they get it. But there's this stage; these are
Oh,
stages. So it's fascinating to hear that you are seeing the
yeah.
same thing that the medium was saying.
Yeah. I mean, I think too, now that I do a lot of education, and I do that with my patients too, like my real life patients when I'm actually being a hospice nurse, because I mention the visioning, I don't say like, "And you might see dead people." Like I use it as like a education tool, like
Right.
pure, like, "And this may happen. And I think it's important for you to know so you're not confused or scared if it does." Some people, when they're getting close to death, will start having visions. These visions might be dreams, it might be this, might be loved ones, might be your dog who died, and just give examples. And I would honestly say 9 times out of 10, because I bring it up and I educate about it, it makes them feel a little more free to say something. And I would
Yeah.
say 9 times out of 10, it's already happening.
And they're
And they'll
like, oh,
already
good.
go, "That's already happened. Now we know
Good.
why."
They're like, great.
So it's like,
She's drinking the Kool-Aid too. Fantastic. I got someone else to talk to.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So,
So
so
I think because like I mention it, at least to me, it seems like I get reports of it more because I'm the one who's like showing them that like I'm educating about it.
let me ask you though, you've had all these experiences, these death experiences, just being in the room or seeing people die in front of you again and again and again. How many years have you been a hospice nurse?
8 or 9. Again,
Eight.
I need
Yeah.
to figure out the actual math of this, but 8 or 9. Yeah.
And so you've seen probably hundreds of deaths at this point in the
Yeah.
game. So you've experienced that from different one of your patients. That has to, I have to ask you, like, what has that done to you on a spiritual point of view? I mean, you've said that you're not afraid of death anymore. You're very similar to near-death experiencers. None of them are afraid of death. Once they see the other side, even shared death experiencers, once they see the other side, they go, it's not even seeing it, they feel it. They
Yeah, I feel
feel
it.
it.
Yeah.
And you're saying the same thing. So they feel it. But has your spirituality changed, strengthened? Um, it's in regards to any, not dogma, but just the concepts of the higher power, life after death. What has that done for you, being exposed to all of this?
Yeah, I think it's just solidified what I've always known. Like I
Okay.
said, I mean, ever since I've been a little girl, I have words for it now, but I couldn't explain this then. But ever since I've been a little girl, I always say I felt homesick for a place that I can't quite remember. Like I've always felt that. Always.
Mm,
And being a hospice nurse has helped me see um, that that's accurate. But I think where we're going is like home, like more like home than here ever could be. And I feel that homeness, that like closeness, that like, oh, there it is. This is the thing that I've like, that I have forgotten about. I see that in dying people when they're very close to death, not just when they're, weeks out, but in that actively dying phase, when I watch people take their last breath, doesn't feel now the grief for me is removed. It's not my loved one. So I think this is why I can almost feel it and see it because it's not my loved one that I'm not going through this, right? But I feel like I can kind of see and feel that place again, like they're so close to it. And I feel the same exact way when I see a baby. So like
yep.
holding a baby, being near a baby, seeing a baby being born,
Hmm.
it feels the same to me. Like they've just come from that place.
And the other one's
And I feel
going,
like I
and the
can
other
like
one's
see it
going.
in their eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. And the
And
other
it's
ones are
like that with a
going.
dying person too.
Right.
It feels the same.
Yeah. There's an energy about a child and there's an energy about someone dying that's similar, very, very similar
Mhm.
because you're just on the other sides of the finish lines. One's a starting line, one's the ending line, but it's all going back to the same place. You're coming and going to the same place, which is
Yeah. And
fascinating.
that is not the only reason why I don't the reason why hospice nursing is not hard to me is that's not the only reason, right? Like there is a beautiful spiritual part of it for me that I don't necessarily talk about with my everyday patients because I don't feel like it's my place really unless they ask. But the biology of it really feels spiritual to me too, and like why I love my job. Like at the end of the day, we're all going to die. Like that's the fact, right? That's the fact of life. And I feel like hospice is a beautiful way to do it. No
Mm,
matter whether you're young or old, like it's still a beautiful way to do it. So it doesn't feel directly sad. It's like it's inevitable, I
mhm.
think. So if it's inevitable and we know that, how do you want it to look? And can I help you have the best death you can since you can't avoid that? You can't avoid it,
Right.
unfortunately. Right.
Right.
So that's why it feels not sad to me. I feel really grateful that I get to be a part of someone's end of life journey.
Did you ever hear the last three words that Steve Jobs ever said right before he died?
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Wow.
Yeah, isn't that
Yeah.
crazy?
Isn't that
Isn't that
amazing?
isn't that amazing that those were the three last words he said?
Amazing.
It's like
Yeah.
wow, wow, wow.
Yeah. I have a whole thing on my Instagram of people who wrote into me telling me their loved one's last words. And
Uh-huh.
like some are beautiful like that, and some are like funny, like your breath stinks, and some are because you don't always know what's going to be your last words, right? So some are like amazing like that, and some are funny, like your breath stinks, or like get me this, and it was so beautiful. I put their last words with like a picture of them with their like just like their family talking about them. It's so beautiful. So
So,
beautiful.
there's a lot of people who are watching who might be having someone go through hospice right now, someone who's dying right now, or someone who just passed. Um, can you explain to people, have you had any experience with people who have had negative dying experiences? You kind of hinted about that with the psychosis, where like, animals are scary, but what from all the hundreds of experiences that you've gone through, has there been any ones that have been like, I see, oh my God, the devil is in the room or something like that? That was not it was not a medical issue of like something's happening with the brain.
No, I have not. I mean, I'm still going to talk about this because people still have traumatic deaths and things like that.
Sure,
But
of
generally
course.
speaking, I've never had anything be like a spiritual feeling of like, this is bad, this is wrong. There's some, some kind of devil or they're going to a bad place. I personally have never had that. I've
Okay.
had hard deaths because people have been terminally agitated,
Mm.
or their symptoms were not controlled because of what they wanted towards their end of life, which was like I can think of one person specifically who didn't want any like Western meds. So no steroids, no morphine, no Ativan, like nothing.
Ooh,
They didn't want anything like that, but they had a brain tumor and were seizing all the time and like really needed that medical intervention, but they didn't want it. So we had to respect their wishes. So they had a really horrible death, like really horrible, really awful to watch, horrific.
right. And with that
That
medicine, and that medicine wouldn't have kept them alive. It would have just kept them comfortable,
right, wouldn't
essentially.
have kept them alive, but would have kept them comfortable. But this person had their own beliefs on what they wanted to do. They kind of wanted to like go through the process of dying, no matter what it was. Right. So even when they couldn't make their own choices, they had it all like legally written out that they didn't want X, Y, and Z given. So it was really hard. It was really hard. But like, I guess someone could look at that if they had a spiritual lens. They could say, like, oh, they could say, they had the devil inside them and they were going to a bad place. By the way this person was acting, yes, you could say she was possessed and going to
Mm,
hell. That's the way it looked. But
sure.
I don't believe that. I don't believe in that there's a hell. I don't believe we go to anywhere bad. I don't believe that. No matter what you've done, I don't think so. So that's my own personal belief. I would never say that to someone that I'm actually working with because I don't think it's my place. They can believe what they want to believe. But I've never experienced something like that. But I've experienced deaths that look like that. And I think it's mostly terminal agitation and unresolved and unmanaged symptoms that are caused
Mm.
by the the disease they're dying from.
What are some stories besides your shared death experience that kind of stood out? Patients or experiences or things that they said that might
Yeah.
have helped you build your tapestry of beliefs on the other side of what you've seen and things like that to reinforce what you saw in the shared death experience. Things that
Yeah.
these people were saying. Like we talked about, yeah, grandma's there, my parents are there, my dog is there. But what are some other things that they've said on their last days?
I wouldn't say sad. I would say the feelings
Okay,
because a lot of people can't talk at the end of life, but they're
sure.
so the greatest thing, the greatest gift that I get like every single time I work is seeing the love that exists between whether it's family or friends or a caregiver, like the love in this little house in the house that they're all caring for the dying loved one. Like there is something about watching other people care for someone dying and even watching that person going through the dying process in such a gracious way. There is something like sacred about it that like really solidifies like to me like the beauty and love that that is the only thing that matters. Like when I'm working, like, I'm like, this is the only thing that life is about. Only thing is
Hmm.
like to love and care for someone because it's so uncomfortable. Like for parents to care for their dying son who shouldn't be dying, right? He's 40 years old. He has children. Like I can think of a family that was so meaningful to me. They're Spanish speaking only. So we had to like use an interpreter on the phone the whole time.
Oh,
But it still felt like I never was even using an interpreter. It was like we could just communicate just by looking at each other. It was a young dad, two young kids, his wife, his parents, her parents, all in the same house, all working together to provide this man with the best death possible, despite it being unfair. Right? It's unfair. Like it's unfair. He's dying, but they didn't.
mhm,
They didn't hide the kids away from it. They cared for him the best he could. They utilized me and the rest of the hospice team to help, make this death the best they could. He did the best he could. And I was there for his last breath. And it was like one of the most beautiful things I ever could have witnessed because they could have been, and they have every right to be how they want to be, right? But they could have been hysterical. They could have been calling 911, trying to make it not happen, not wanting to accept the fact that he was dying, right? But instead they
mhm,
didn't. Like the wife was laying her head on his chest, his parents were at his head, like rubbing his head and like whispering sweet nothings. Her parents were at his feet. The kids were in the bed, and they were all just letting him go. And makes me want to cry just thinking about it. It sounds it is horrifically sad, but it also was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen, that they were willing to like set aside how uncomfortable they must be, how sad they must be to
For
like
him.
be there and witness his last breath. And like
Yeah.
that is the stuff that gets me. That is the stuff that I'm like, this is what life is all about. This is why we're here.
Yeah. Culturally, I'm Latino, so I understand culturally, it's not looked upon the same as is in the West. It's death. Death is a different, it's treated a bit differently. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense to me. Um, if there's someone watching right now who is going, not personally going through hospice, maybe they are. If they're watching this and they're going through hospice, God bless, uh, that you're watching our show, or this episode. But if there's family members, loved ones who are currently going or are about to go into hospice, watching a loved one go into hospice, what advice would you have for them to make it okay and not pleasurable, but comfortable for the one
Yeah.
dying, and how they should deal, or advice on how they should deal?
I think remembering to remember that it is uncomfortable. And just because it feels uncomfortable or sad or awful or overwhelming doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. And I always tell people to plan, 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 plan. Like we plan weddings, we plan vacations, we plan so many things. Plan the death. Like say the word death and die. Like get used to those really uncomfortable things. Just because we plan for it and try to understand it doesn't mean it's going to happen any quicker. And in fact, most people live better and die better if they plan. So try to get a plan in place. If it could, we know you're going to die, right? So what would be the perfect surroundings? What are you going to do if this happens, if that happens? How do you want, get everything in order, plan for it and talk about it. And also know that it's really normal to like feel afraid, feel sad, feel angry. It's not necessarily going to like feel good, right? So like no, normalizing that and speaking those things into existence. So like I have many patients say to me, I am angry, I'm dying, I'm afraid to die. And I always just say that that's okay. That's so normal to have those things. And the fact that you're willing to speak those words out loud means that you're already a step ahead of like most people. Like there's something in about speaking the truth that can free you a bit, even for a moment, from like that fear and anxiety of it, right? So it's like just do that. Keep the communication lines open, plan, and ask for help. Ask for help from whoever will help you, right? Whether it's the hospice team, doctors, social workers, your friends, your family. This is like a like all hands on deck kind of time, right? So you can't do it alone.
What I find fascinating about your career, your occupation, is that your training, and correct me if I'm wrong, your training is medical training of how to help someone to get through. But you've spoken very little of that in this conversation. It's all been more about emotional support, spiritual support, mental health support. It sounds like you're almost a social worker, a spiritual, like a doula, if you a death doula, if you will, walking people towards the light, if you will. And it's not just about more morphine. Okay, more of this, more of that. I've heard very little about that. I find fascinating about hospice nurses and hospice doctors who
Yeah.
most of their job is not what they were taught in school.
Right. I do think that is something that where like people say like, oh, it takes a special someone, right? I think it takes a certain type of personality to be able to like communicate these things, right? You're either like kind of like good at doing that and like reading the room, or you're not. It can be taught, but I think it kind of like you have to have life experience. Like because of my ICU nursing, right? I feel like I can sort of see the other side of like if you didn't choose hospice, right?
Right.
So I can speak to that experience. But I will say, like on my day, because I'm on a podcast with you and like the questions you're asking and the things we're talking about, that is mostly what I'm talking about. But when I'm talking to a hospice family, and there are many days I am doing the medical side of it, which still feels really good because some days it is a matter of tweaking medications and helping people understand that like morphine isn't just to kill someone, right? It truly helps. So there is a lot of that. It just depends on the situation. I'm all about morphine. Okay. We could talk about medications all day long. So there is that side of me for sure. For
I
sure.
mean, if you have any morphine, let me know. I would like, no, I'm joking.
I
I'm
don't.
joking.
I don't.
You got any side? You didn't take some from the office? No, I'm joking. No, I've never been on anything that strong. Thank God I've never needed anything that strong at a hospital. I appreciate it. But that's something also too. There, do you find like that one talk, that one example you gave of them refusing morphine or Western
Oh,
medicine? Does that
yeah.
come up often where people's personal belief systems stop them from just being comfortable in their last days?
So that was an extreme case for sure. That has only come up one time in, the 8 or 9 years I've done hospice. So that was an extreme case. But the fear of morphine comes up almost every day in my job. And I
Really?
really have to do a lot of education over using morphine, why we use it, what it does, what amount it is. Most people think they hear the word morphine, it's super strong. It's not, I mean, and specifically in hospice, the amount of morphine we give is like minuscule. It's like what you would take for like a toothache. And now
Really?
we could advance it up. I mean, of course, depending on someone's pain and what they come on to hospice using, things like that. But generally speaking, if no one's been using any kind of narcotic prior to hospice, the amount of morphine we give is minuscule, like minuscule. No ability to quicken death with the amount of morphine we're given. It's scientifically proven. Hospice doesn't do that, but people just think that because they hear the word morphine. So tons of
Really?
education about morphine is needed. Yeah.
I always I always thought of morphine as just a painkiller. I never knew it was like, I mean, yeah, of course you jack anything up, you could die from it.
Yeah.
But I never heard, I mean, I'm not in the hospice game, so I haven't heard of like, oh yeah, that's how they kill people. They do it with morphine. Like that's
Oh my
like, I
gosh,
don't
there's
want to,
whole like pages dedicated to like hospice kills people.
you're
And I'm
kidding.
on it and they don't like me. They're like,
Wow.
this nurse, how dare she? Yes. Yes.
Really? So there's a, yeah, just
Yes.
because of it's because of dogmatic belief systems.
Yeah.
Or conspiracy theories,
Yeah,
essentially.
or like their experience. That's one of the things is like people, if they didn't have someone really educating them on what was happening and why it was happening, I could see where they could say, they didn't care my loved one wasn't eating and drinking. They had changes in breathing. They looked like they were suffocating, which it does look like that. If you don't understand what's happening, it can look like that. No one did anything except give morphine. And so then putting grief, like adding grief in there, it's like, of course they think that. They think there's person suffered and no one did anything except for load them full of drugs, and
Wow.
if you weren't educated on what was actually happening, or maybe you were, but you couldn't hear it because you're too much in grief,
Sure.
I can see where they could draw that conclusion.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I'm going to
Yeah.
ask you a few questions I ask all of my guests. What is your definition of living a fulfilled life?
I think living in the present moment as much as you can,
Good answer.
period.
If if you had a chance to go back in time and speak to little Julie, what advice would you give her?
Oh, um, little Julie. Oh, little Julie, I'd say, baby girl, nothing is wrong with you. Nothing's wrong with you. You're gonna be okay. Everything's gonna work out, and nothing's wrong with you. I do that like every day, Alex. This is me like petting my little inner child. I'm like constantly reassuring her, "You're
It's a,
okay, honey.
it's a
Don't
good
worry."
it's a great exercise to actually visualize yourself as a
I
child, little
know.
version of you, and literally sit down and have a conversation with
I know.
that version of
Little
you,
girl.
because it's like you look back, you're like, because you remember what you felt like, who you were at that moment, and
I know.
you want to bring in, it's like it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be fine,
Yeah.
you know. If you had a if how do you define God or source?
Oh gosh. I don't try to really. The more I think I've tried to define God, because it was easier and then the closer I got to this like defined God that I have had experiences with, the more and more I realized like it's not defined. So it's like a feeling of love and peace and like a divinely guided, a higher power that deeply loves me personally, would never be condemning, or judgmental. So it's a lot of things. It's like hard to define, because it's so vast now. But I still try to have it be like a personal God who like knows me personally, because like the more general and vast it is, it's hard for me to like think that it would know me personally. Um, right? But I do believe it does. Yeah. So
Well, I mean, yeah.
some kind of higher power that's like all loving, all knowing, and um divinely guiding us
Uh,
all.
just to stop for a second, I find it fascinating that you mentioned that because so many people do believe that, like, oh, God doesn't know who I am. It's such this kind of programming that they don't understand how powerful, and they are God. They're part of
Yeah,
God.
they're
Or
part. Yeah,
all, where
agreed.
everything is part of the source and of God
Yeah.
and of the universe, whatever you want to say. It's not like, oh, they forgot about Julie. Julie's like off in the corner. Who's that girl? Like, the God's in the room. Like,
Yeah.
who's that girl down there with the YouTube channel? What is that talking? What is she talking?
Yeah.
That's not the way it works. I wanted to put that out there for people. Um, what is love?
Well, I think God is love.
Hmm.
I think be hard for me to define it, but I suppose like if I'm gonna like bring it back to like hospice, I always say like watching someone care for someone on hospice is like love in action. So like
Mm, that's
giving
beautiful.
freely, sitting with someone even though you're really uncomfortable, because you love them. So it's hard for me to, I guess, to define it, but a lot of times like I see it in action,
Beautiful.
through other people's actions. Like I see the love, and it's overwhelming. It's really overwhelming. It can overwhelm me sometimes. Where like I leave the house and cry. Like I'll leave my patient's house and like go in my car and cry because I'm so overwhelmed by the feeling of love.
That's beautiful.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. I'm sorry. I'm not really answering your questions,
no,
Alex.
that's perfect. No, you're answering them perfectly. It's fine.
Okay.
If you could ask God or source one question, what would it be?
I'm curious about if I'll be born again. So I would ask if like, will I be born again once I
Mm,
die? Once I die, will I be born again? I'd love to know
mhm.
that. I don't have like many questions for God. I just feel like it is. God is. It all is. Everything is. Acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. So like, I don't have many questions, but that's one.
All right.
Once I die, will I be born again?
Fair enough. And what is the ultimate purpose of life?
I think to be present with God at all times and see how your life unfolds.
Beautiful answer. Where can people find out more about you, your book, Nothing to Fear, and your YouTube channel and all the work you're doing in this world?
Yeah, so you can find me on any platform that you enjoy: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, at Hospice Nurse Julie. So the same name across all boards. So you also can go to hospicenursejulie.com. And my book is really anywhere you get books. There's an audio book, which is me talking, which was way harder than I thought,
It's
Alex. But
yes,
so it's my
yes,
voice. It's my voice.
yes.
So the
Horrible.
audiobook, yeah, yeah.
It's horrible.
Audiobook, Kindle, hard copy. Basically, you can get it anywhere you get books, but you also could find it at hospicenursejulie.com. There's links, there's international links. Yeah.
Cool. And do you have any parting messages for the audience?
No, I think if there's anything, if you want to learn more, so like I feel like we touched on a lot of things. And this is gonna sound like a plug to my YouTube. I guess it kind of is, but really my YouTube channel like covers all bases. Like it covers like the how-to of to being like how to be a caregiver, like just like the logistics of that, right? To like the warm and fuzzy feelings of hospice. Like the YouTube channel really covers all bases, and I think it's important to do both. So if you want to learn more, if you're like listening to this and you want to learn more, I feel like that'd be the best place to start.
Julie, it has been a pleasure and honor speaking to you. Thank you so much for not only
Thanks,
being on the
Al.
show, but for the amazing work you're doing to help souls cross over, and the work that you do, all the time in hospice, and helping the world awaken with the work that you're doing. So, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.